Hi, my name is Joey Muenich. This week is very, very different because AJ is not the host. She is in the hot seat this week. And I am thrilled and honored to be your host tonight. Um, uh, Monday Night Readings got its start from a couple of different directions. First was a place in Minneapolis called the Playwright Center, and they used to have Monday night readings where playwrights would have the opportunity to share their works in progress in front of an audience. Um, Another was the fact that fiction writers often had many opportunities to have readings done, and there wasn't that many opportunities for nonfiction writers. And AJ was like, well, I'm going to change that. And so she created Monday Night Readings. Um, if you're new to Monday Night Readings, I just want everyone to know this is a forum for really positive feedback. We are here to celebrate all of the fantastic feels that we get when we listen to AJ read from her new book, Write a Must Read. It's not a place for constructive criticism. There are other venues for that. And if you journal about it, you might just decide not to do that at all. And I also want everybody to know that the chat is kind of our forum to respond. If during the reading or anything that's happening, you get the good feels and you want to share what's happening in your bones and in your twinkles and everything that you're feeling about what you hear tonight, please share that. We want to know if part of her reading moves you, we want to know about it, share it in the chat. If a particular sentence really strikes you and you want to share with the author, by all means do that in the chat, because for every Monday night reading, Laura saves the chat, and it's a keepsake, if you will, for the author from this night. So that said, I think, Laura, would you please do the introductions as only you can do?
I'd be happy to. On June 7th, 1958, the artist known as Prince Rogers Nelson was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. On March 19th, 1973, his number one fan was born. And that fan was a boy named Bill Oh, I'm sorry, that was a bad copy paste. That fan was a woman named Ann Jeanette, also known as Annie, also known as AJ Harper. Notable moments in AJ's life: wandering the streets of Egypt with her mother, Nikki, in pursuit of a PhD. Her mother was in pursuit, not AJ. They don't just give those to precocious 6-year-olds. Now, other notable moments: meeting her best friend, Zoe Bird, as a teen, becoming a playwright in residence at the tender age of 17, and of course, the single greatest event in her life, both then and now, being the assistant director for the play Psycho Beach Party at the age of 19, where her life was forever changed because of the person playing the part of Bettina Barnes, the esteemed Joseph Muenich. And because he, 2 years later, would introduce AJ to her now wife, to which Joey would like to say, "You're welcome." In addition to being a playwright, AJ Harper, former medical transcriptionist, honed her writing chops as a ghostwriter for almost 2 decades, until finally she decided that she would rather teach people how to write a must-read themselves. She created and eventually sold an award-winning publishing company, Interlude Press, who launched a few superstars into the world of YA fiction, and of course, created the Top 3 Book Workshop, which is also launching multiple superstars into the world of prescriptive nonfiction. Her first book to carry her name and her name only, Write a Must Read, hits bookshelves globally tomorrow. Joey?
Thank you, Laura. That was beautiful. All right, so AJ, how does it feel to let someone else sit in your seat and do this right now?
Awesome. It's great. I love not being the MC. I have to give props to Laura. She likes to redo bios for people, and that was pretty good. That was really good. Love that. We should just change mine.
Awesome. All right, so Aunt Jeanette, you know the question. Yes. Can you please tell us, who is your reader? Who is your book for?
I'm sure my students who are here are delighted that I have to answer this question, because I bombard them with this question on almost every day. So my readers are authors and aspiring authors who don't want to write just any book. They want to write a book that people read all the way through, love, and recommend to others.
Is that your core message, or is your core message different than who your reader is?
Yes, a core message is the message that on which your book is built,
Okay.
that speaks to that reader. And my core message is a book is not about something, a book is for someone.
I love it. I love it. That gives me goosebumps.
Yay, good. A good core message should give you goosebumps.
Good. So I know you're going to do a little bit of a reading for us, but we talked about a couple of them. So would you be willing to set up the excerpt that you are about to read for everybody?
Yeah. So, and then we're going to do a little chit chat, right?
Yep. And we'll talk on
Okay.
the other end.
Okay. So I decided to just read from chapter 1. I think that's a good place to start. It really needs no introduction, actually. So I'll just go ahead and start. We good, Joe?
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, AJ Harper reads.
Chapter 1. Reader first, last, and always. It was the fastest I ever spent $1,500. It was also the only time I booked a trip without first consulting my calendar and checking with my wife. The subject line caught my eye: spend the day with Stephen Pressfield. I opened the message immediately. Now you should know that I hate email. And because I'm usually writing or editing, I have a bad habit of letting emails pile up unanswered. Promo emails, forget it. I'm an email marketer's worst nightmare. I almost never open them. So why did I click on the email about spending the day with Stephen Pressfield? Because his book, The War of Art, changed my life. Pressfield had never done an event like that before, and the prospect of spending the day with him, learning from him in person, was so exciting, I didn't hesitate to open the email. I also didn't hesitate to hit the buy button and plunk down a bunch of money for the one-day experience. I didn't care what it cost. Okay, I cared. I just didn't care enough to hesitate. Within 2 minutes of receiving the email, I registered as one of the lucky 35. Within 10 minutes, I booked my flight to Nashville, where the event would be held. I didn't check first to see if it would take me away from something important. I simply had to see him. I ended up squeezing the trip in between 2 other trips and only spent about 26 hours in Tennessee. From the time I left New York, I tried to think of something appropriate to say to Mr. Pressfield. However much I enjoy someone's work, I'm not the type of person who waits at stage doors or stands in line to get autographs. I cringe from secondhand embarrassment whenever people try to talk to celebrities. Still, this was my chance. I'd have to come up with something. Because we were in a small group, I expected to be among strangers, which is why I was so surprised to spot my friend Susan Michaels sitting in the front row. If not for her beckoning me over to sit next to her, I probably would have found my usual seat in the back row, chair closest to the door. When Mr. Pressfield arrived, the butterflies in my belly multiplied by 10. Is this how people feel about meeting boy bands or sports heroes? Because, wow. A tall, soft-spoken man with a kind face, he shared his thoughts on the artist's journey and stories from his early life as a writer. Every so often, he referred to his loose typewritten pages, which he left on the table just inches from my own notebook. As he spoke, I took copious notes. One of his comments about Joseph Campbell's breakdown of the hero's journey had me buzzing in my seat, looking around the room to see if anyone else noticed the story structure glitter bomb he had just dropped. More on that later. At the break, Mr. Pressfield remained in the room, scanning his papers just a foot away from me. While I tried to muster the courage to get his attention, the woman at the table next to mine motioned him over and said, "Your book changed my life." She clutched her copy of The War of Art to her chest and then slowly slid it across the table toward him. I was close enough to see the deep creases along the spine from years of reading and rereading. She opened the book and proudly displayed marked up pages. She had underlined, circled, and highlighted passage after passage. So many corners had been turned down, the book had expanded in size, as if someone had dipped it in water and left it in the sun to dry. "You probably hear that all the time," she said. Mr. Pressfield offered an unassuming smile and nodded. "A fair amount, yes." I kicked myself for forgetting my own copy of The War of Art. Not because I wanted an autograph, I too wanted to show him my well-loved book evidence that it had made a difference in my life. A visual representation of how much it meant to me, how much it still means to me. I'd lost count of how many times I'd read it. Tell him your story, I thought. Tell him why you're here. I tried to find the words to say it succinctly, not to take up too much of his time. And after he autographed the woman's copy of this book, I seized the moment. I quit my job because of that book, I blurted. Not exactly eloquent, but okay. His eyes narrowed. How did that turn out for you? Very well. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. His shoulders relaxed and he smiled again. Good. People tell me that often and I'm always afraid they went broke. Yes, the war of art inspired me to quit my job. Stephen Pressfield didn't tell me to do it. I finally summoned the will to do it because of his words. After reading his book, I won my decades-long battle with writer's block and devised a system, which I share later in this book, to ensure that it would never happen again. I also vowed that I would never take a straight job again, the day job many artists take to support themselves while they write, paint, make music. And I didn't. I read his book in 2004, and by March 2005, I was done with straight jobs forever. Through his book, Pressfield introduced me to the concept of resistance. And through practice, I was able to develop a system that worked for me. It worked so well, in fact, I stopped believing that writer's block was a thing because it isn't. That was the missing piece I needed to follow my heart and to follow my dreams. If it weren't for his book, I'm quite certain I would not be living the life I live today, the life I love, and you would not be reading this book because it would not exist. I did get in trouble with my wife for booking the trip, by the way, because I had forgotten that she had purchased tickets for us to see Brandi Carlile at Madison Square Garden for a special date night. That did not go over well at all. She forgave me, but I'm pretty sure she's still mad about it. Was seeing Stephen Pressfield worth the expense and the argument with my wife? Yes, it was. To have the chance to meet and learn from someone who changed the course of my life was worth that and more. When you write a book that helps a reader transform some aspect of their life, they become your ardent follower, your raving fan, your ambassador. They don't hesitate to take you up on your offers. They sign up for your classes. They buy your next book and your next book and your next, often without thinking about it. They move heaven and earth to gain access to you. And they help you sell your book. I have recommended The War of Art to hundreds of students, clients, colleagues, and friends. I have purchased dozens of copies to give to people. Heck, I'm telling you how awesome it is right now, which will probably lead to more book sales for Stephen Pressfield. All that is possible when you set out to write a must read. Think about the books that changed your life, the books you will never part with, that survive through various moves and stages of your life, the books you underline, dog ear, and highlight, the books you keep on your nightstand because you want to read them over and over, the books you may not read again, but keep as a souvenir for the experience you had reading them, or to remember all that you accomplished because you read them. These are the books you give as gifts and recommend to people. These are the books you buy in paperback, ebook, and audiobook because you want access to all the versions on all your devices. These are the must-read books that make it onto your top 3 list of faves. Imagine writing a book that inspires change in readers, that motivates them to fix something, change their mind about something, or change their behavior, to grow, to make bold decisions and take important action. Imagine writing a book that readers underline, dog ear, and highlight. A book people reread again and again and again. Imagine writing a book that people love so much they fly across the country just to meet you and say, "Thank you, your book changed my life. This is the book you're about to learn how to write." And that's the open of chapter 1.
Everybody is applauding as they should be. That was stunning.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. I have heard those words in so many iterations about what it is that you're passionate about, and it just makes me beam with so much pride. I'm so proud of you. And the way that that comes together is just such a glorious opening. And I'm really excited to get Stephen Pressfield's book now. I can't believe I haven't read it. I feel like the only person in the room. But I'm curious, how does it feel to read that?
Well, I did read the audiobook, so I have practiced that. It feels amazing to read it, especially because, and there's a lot of writers here. Chapter 1 is really hard. Chapter 1 is the one you come back to over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm not even sure I'm probably 80% happy with it. But eventually the book has to go to the printer. So you have to let it go. But I really love that open, and I tinkered with it. If you count tinkering, it's probably like 25 drafts of that open. And so I'm very happy with it. It feels amazing to read it, actually. And the reason I went, a lot of times it's good with prescriptive nonfiction to start with your reader's pain, from where they starting, their frustrations, their challenges. But I really wanted to start with the promise. That was important to me, was to show what's possible, because I'm trying to get people to see the value of writing something that's life-changing versus something that just gets done, right? Yep. Because that experience is because of a book. I did all that, spent all that money, exhausted myself, upset my beautiful wife, who's forgiven me, and we're going to see Brandi Carlile in the fall, so it's going to be okay. I did all that because of one book. So I wanted to demonstrate and really get readers excited about what was possible for them as authors if they would just commit to that,
I love how you talk about dissatisfaction in that equation. In my work, we talk about the formula for change, and it's about dissatisfaction plus vision times first steps has to be greater than resistance. And you talked about resistance and dissatisfaction in there. Where does your vision come from? I mean, is that introduction really the story of the vision birth for you, or is that kind of the story of some first steps for you?
It's neither. It's just a story that I thought of when I thought, how can I show the promise? I just deliberately wanted to show what is possible. And I have a lot of stories. There's another one I tell at the end of the book about and my students are here, they know it well, about being chased down by one of Mike Michalowicz's fans into an elevator against my will, because that person had to get a message to Mike through me. And then I have a lot of stories about other authors. Julian Winters is here. I've seen people line up you can't even count how far the line is for people to come and talk to him. So there are plenty of examples. I just wanted one that was personal to me, that would show a little bit about who I am and what matters to me. And that wasn't really the birth of it. That was really just a good example.
Okay.
But if you want to know the vision for it, I think it's just when I was a ghostwriter for 10 years, there was just this, in the beginning, I would just write any book because I just wanted to get paid. And I wanted to learn how to write books because I was a playwright first. And then I started to realize that there were two camps of authors, people who were just trying to get that better business card done as fast as they could and didn't really expect anyone to read it. And people who really cared about what happened to their readers. And that's when I realized I wanted to focus on those people.
That doesn't surprise me one bit, because when I met AJ and she was writing plays, what I learned quickly about her writing style was that the most important person wasn't on the page and wasn't on the stage. They were in the seats watching what was happening. It was so about entertaining the audience or manipulating the audience to be afraid or whatever it might be that you would call entertainment. And And I see that as such a natural transition into top three and what you do with Write a Must Read. And I wonder, did that, in what you said about ghostwriting, sort of seems to be, it did it take a while for that to percolate into your writing, even in ghostwriting?
I wasn't conscious of it, but you're right. I was the nerdy playwright who actually wanted to be an entertainer and not so much a highbrow person who, I don't know. I felt I was kind of a loner in my playwright group because most of them were writing stuff that it seemed like the less you were able to understand the play, the better it was supposed to be. And I just didn't, it was a different time, but I just was just confused by that. And I just wanted to provide an experience for the audience. So I guess it does actually translate to the work I do now, because I'm in the book, I teach how to create an experience for the reader, but even more than that, to be mindful of their experience. Because when you write prescriptive nonfiction specifically, sometimes you're introducing concepts and ideas they've never thought about before, and you're kind of rocking their world a little bit. Or sometimes you're providing an epiphany for them that makes them kind of feel bad about their choices. There's just a lot of emotion wrapped up in prescriptive nonfiction. And I think that's part of the care about the audience that I used to feel, and the care about the reader that I feel now that isn't really important, and I hope I conveyed in the book.
I'm sorry to go back to playwriting again, but I want to talk to everybody out there about a specific experience that we had with the Greenwood Players Children's Theater, and that was we took on a project to create a play called True History of the Hmong People, and it was a play with Hmong and non-Hmong students in high school about learning what their family's experience was coming to America. And you were in the incredibly difficult position to take an improvised play and create a script out of it in English and in Hmong. And I'm curious if you'll talk a little bit about that experience too.
Sure. So the play was True History of the Hmong People, and it was in partnership with Greenwood Players, but also with the Hmong Leadership Organization. That at the time, was that the largest population of Hmong people in the US, or was that in St. Paul maybe?
It was probably St. Paul or Fresno. Both had really big Hmong populations, but Menominee had a huge influx, and there were issues with non-Hmong people and Hmong people getting along, and that was a big part of the reason for doing it.
Yeah, so there were a lot of people, non-Hmong people, who were confused. They didn't understand why the Hmong were there in large groups. They didn't understand their cultures and traditions. They didn't understand the agreements made with the US to come here. And so it was a challenge to write a play based on, to be clear, I was a playwright in residence at an improvisational theater. So this is an odd situation because they weren't really writing it down. So it was, and Joe was an actor there, lead actor there, but I would do more like dramaturgical work. But this time we had to write it down, and we worked with students at the high school, Hmong and non-Hmong, to write this beautiful play based on their improvisation work with the theater. And I pulled it all together based on stories. And it was this most magical, we were mindful of the audience the whole time. How can we entertain them and move them and shift their hearts, and also explain what's happening so that they know why these people are in their community, and that they understand that there are veterans of a US war, and that they understand all they sacrifice. And it turned out to be a game changer for the community. That was an amazing experience. But you have to be mindful of the audience, and that's a mixed audience. So sometimes it's a challenge to consider all those people.
I thought you totally met that challenge when all of the Hmong speaking people laughed at jokes being told in Hmong that you had helped to write. So the experience and like the laughter was recognition that you were getting the story exactly spot on and helping everybody tell their stories. And that was at a time where I don't think that could happen again, but it was really, really a beautiful experience. And thanks for sharing that. I want to ask another one of your questions to you, and that is, what
Okay.
change do you want to see in the world because of this book?
So I'm really hoping that we can change the way we think about writing nonfiction books so that it's expected that we go for writing a quality book that changes lives. So that the default is not, let's do it fast. Let's just get it out. I really want to change that, have a sea change so that it's no longer acceptable to do that. I mean, I've got nothing against writing stuff fast, but let's be honest about what it really takes to edit a book and get a book to market. I think sometimes when we say write a book in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 2 days, I've heard one was 6 hours. I'm looking at Julian's face. Let's be honest about what that actually is. I think it's disingenuous to say this is what you can do, but then not explain what you can't do because you did it fast. So I'd rather that people start to say, I want to do the very best I can. So I'm going to learn how to do this rather than just try and get it done as fast as possible. That's what I hope, that we all write better books.
So I sort of mentioned that the entertainer in you was so paramount in your playwriting, and to me it seems like a natural transition into your nonfiction. And I wonder, was there like a moment when a light bulb went off and you were like, oh, not everybody knows this, or not everybody gets this, and was that the prepatus for creating Top Three?
Yeah, I definitely knew it as a ghostwriter. I can't tell you, and I've got ghostwriter friends here. I see Jen Singer; she's one of the best ghostwriters there is. Jen can agree, I'm sure, and KP's here. I can, but you talk to enough people as a ghost, and you ask them really basic questions. Who's your book for? What's the core message? Or maybe you call it a thesis, or maybe you call it a big idea, or whatever. And what is the transformation that you are promising? And honestly, it's very hard for people to answer the question. And I'm not dissing anyone. I'm just saying that I don't think that I think people start working on a book without thinking about these crucial things. And the really important book development time is usually skipped. And so, probably 3 or 4 years into ghostwriting books, I realized, we have to look at this in a different way. And I started to come up with systemized way of asking questions and helping people. That was the bulk of my work. Writing the book was hard and took time, but the really time intensive stuff was, do you even know who this is for? Can you articulate the central theme here, the central message? Do you know where you want your reader to be at the end? And honestly, I would say that almost no one could answer those questions. I can maybe think of one person. That's out of hundreds. So I think, people need those frameworks. It's not because they aren't intelligent people. They are. We're just not expected. We don't have, how to write a nonfiction book 101 in high school or college. So it's not like we're expected to understand this stuff. But I think we have to value it.
Is there any experiences that you had in doing this book, your book, versus a ghostwritten book that you probably would not have learned otherwise?
Oh, yeah. When you're a ghostwriter and you exclusively ghostwrite and you don't write anything else, it, you lose your voice. It just happens. And if you're becoming other people, and so you get good at that, and then you just completely forget. And when I sat down to write this book, I had absolutely no idea what my voice was. None at all. I just sounded like the most boring person on the entire planet. And then when I did have some like little good, juicy, fun stuff in there, it just sounded like Mike Michalowicz, who I co-write with and have written 9 books with. So it was like boring plus some like, Jersey frat boy stuff. And none of that is me. So it took me months. And I would sit in my writing sprints with my students trying to hack stuff out, being just as frustrated as they were. But I kept going, and eventually I figured out what my voice is on the page.
Let's talk about writer's block.
Yes.
When I lived with Anjanette in the Earth home,
Yes, we did live in an Earth home.
Yeah.
Like the Berenstain Bears. No, did the Berenstain Bears live in an Earth home?
I don't know.
No, they didn't. They lived in a wood, like treehouse thing, right?
Yes.
But we definitely had grass for our roof.
Yeah. So, well, okay, first of all, how we got into the Earth Home. Anjanette was working, like as an editor at the Dunn County News, which is a newspaper that her wife's like extended family had owned for over 100 years.
Yes.
And it's funny because that was before you all got together too.
Yes.
So here she was like totally involved in the Flint's business.
Yes.
There was an ad that was going to go in, like a for rent ad in tomorrow's paper, and Anjanette pre-looked at it, and you called the crazy dude. And
yes.
That was how we ended up in the Earth Home.
In the Earth Home in the woods.
Yep, the Earth Home in the woods, where we had our most psychic, beautiful dog, Georgia.
Yeah.
Anyway, so a little walk down memory lane. I remember Anjanette would go into her office and close the door. And this would be like 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night. I would be watching TV. I would go to bed at 11, and you would be playing games on the computer since 8 o'clock, 9 7 o'clock at night, trying.
What writers do? What are you talking about?
What? Talk to us a little bit about what it is for those of us who don't know. What was the breakthrough for you in writer's block?
So that wasn't writer's block. Writers just like warm up. We just warm up to stuff, you know. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes that's what we're doing. But you're right. I did have writer's block quite a lot. So, you know, that was a time when I really believed the what I think is just BS now, that you're supposed to wait to be inspired, and you know, you'll get into the flow. And I would just read everything I could about getting into flow. And the thing is, and best times to write. And I tried to do all this trickery to make sure that I wasn't procrastinating, which is really just, you know, fear of your voice and your story and what matters to you. Resistance, like Stephen Pressfield talks about. And I would have long periods where I couldn't write anything at all. It's very hard when you have to turn something in, or when something matters to you, or when you just have something to say and you feel it just compounds, and then you feel worse and worse and worse and worse. So it was tough. And there's a lot of things I missed out on because of it. I actually have a list of it in the book. I list the things that I lost because I believed in writer's block. And it's really impressive in a bad way. In a bad way. Like, oh my gosh, are you serious? You did that? Yes, I totally did, because I couldn't fix it. But I was Pressfield who explained that writer's block is really just resistance. But that's fine, and that's cool. And I would have said, yeah, okay, Stephen, that's nice. But the thing that really did it for me was he said it's a law of the universe. Okay, maybe it's not. I don't really care. I believed it, because what he said was, it's like gravity. That was the thing that really shifted it for me, because I kept trying to fix it. And once I understood that it was just going to be back in the morning, then I had to just learn how to live with it. And then that's when I figured it out. Oh, okay, I have now a system I do, and that I talk about in the book, how to kill that. But I don't say for good, because like I talk about, the procrastinating or writer's block is that inner critic troll. We call them trolls in class and workshop, but they're zombies. You can kill them, and then in the morning they're back. And you just have to know that, because then you don't feel bad about yourself. Because if the next day you're struggling again, now you feel bad, and then that just compounds and compounds and compounds. So if you just say, okay, I'll see you tomorrow, nasty troll, then you can handle it, and you just have your battle that day and say, good night, sleep tight, see you tomorrow. That was a game changer for me.
I love that. I love that a lot. Um, you had this transition from playwright to ghostwriter. Did fiction have anything to do with that step in that process?
No, I will not speak for my fellow ghosts who are here today, but I had to draw the line at ghosting fiction.
Okay.
I just couldn't do it. I just could not do it. Now, I've known ghosts of fiction. When a series becomes very popular, for example, in a genre fiction, mystery, romance, whatever, a lot of that gets ghosted eventually because the writer can't keep up with the demand, or frankly, they get old and they really just don't want to do it anymore. So I know some ghosts of fiction, but for me, I don't think it's a bad thing to ghostwrite nonfiction because it's not my stories, not my ideas, not my frameworks, not my messaging. Yes, there's craft involved, but it's not coming from me in that way. Whereas fiction, I really think that that's about the artist. And I just could not do it. Could not do it. But no offense, no judging anyone who wants to do it.
Did you write any of your own fiction that wasn't ghostwriting, that was just for practice or for?
Yeah, sure. Lots of fun stuff. Yeah, fun stories here and there. Nothing that's published.
And is that, when you think about your reader for that, are you the reader for that? Or when it's not even something that's going to be published? Or I can imagine, like with fan fiction, other fans, of the fiction that want to keep reading the story would be kind of your audience in a way.
No, I don't really. I mean, I think with fiction, you're writing to the people who benefit from the themes that matter and the values that you have in your fiction. There are fiction authors here who can answer those questions better than I can because I haven't written fiction in a really, really long time, although I hope to do it again. But I think, you're always writing for your reader, but it's less of, and you're mindful of reader experience with a novel as well, but it's not quite the same kind of reader experience.
Well, I love the experience as a listener to your voice on the page, and I'm hoping you have a second excerpt that you'd be willing to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I just kind of have to scroll to the spot. Since my mom's here, I'm just gonna scroll to a story about my mom. My students have heard it, so I hope you guys don't mind hearing it again. I worked on this and worked on this and worked on this, and my students heard all sorts of versions of it. This is called The Odds Are in Your Favor. In my more than 30 years as a professional writer and 17 years as a ghostwriter and editor, I have figured out that the single most important factor in success as an author is persistence. The authors who show up day after day, who keep at it, almost always achieve success beyond their goals. The thing is, most people give up. I remember a conversation I had with my mother when I was just a girl with a wish to be a writer. Even at the age of 13, I was down on myself, ready to set my dream aside, because I believed the hype about the long shot. Everyone wants to be a writer. What makes you think you can make a career out of that? It's really hard to get published. It's really hard to get noticed. The field is too crowded. In my mom's battered silver Honda, waiting for the engine to warm up, I slouched in my seat and stared at the defrost climbing up the window. Mom would always say, "When it looks like the shape of Batman, we can go." We were at the 2 roundish blob stage, no superhero in sight. People say the odds are 1 in a million, I said, as I rubbed my gloved hands together. We hadn't had above 0 temps in weeks. Maybe they are, she replied, but let's do the math. If 1 million people want to be a professional writer, at least half of them will never even start. They'll talk about it, but they won't write the first word. Another quarter will quit before they finish. Writing is hard, and most people get frustrated and give up. So now you have about 250,000 people. That's still a lot of people to compete with, I said. True, but writers deal with a lot of rejection. At least another 150,000 will throw in the towel at some point because they'll think that it's hopeless, or because they think that the decision makers don't know what they're doing, or because they believe their families when they tell them they should get a real job. So now you have about 100,000 people vying for the same dream. She let me sit quietly and think about those numbers. 100,000 people still seem like an impossible number. It might as well have been a million. As the bulbous shape started to form Batman's wings, Mom said, "This is where craft makes the difference. Of the 100,000 people, at least half of them are not committed to craft, to learning how to get better, to listening to mentors and editors. They will only go so far because they think they don't need any help. Now you have about 50,000 people who are in it with you." I sat up taller in my seat. Of those 50,000, she continued, only about 10,000 will have natural talent to do big things. So now you're one of 10,000. What's left is luck, and you can beat those odds too. Mom switched from the defrost to heat, and the warm, dry air blasted my face. She put the car in reverse and added, "You know how you can beat the odds, Annie? You beat the odds by trying. The more often you try, the more often you put yourself out there, the better your odds." Suddenly, my dream of becoming a successful writer seemed possible. 10,000 was a lot of people, but nowhere near 1 million. I could work hard. I could get better. I could keep showing up. I had a chance. You have a chance too. In fact, the odds are better for you. Know why? Because your book can be one of many on the same topic. People don't read one book in your genre or with your focus and then stop. They read several books on your topic, or maybe even hundreds of books on your topic. Sometimes people read several books with the same message. Now, I know that my mother made up those numbers. She wasn't using exact science, but she wasn't far off. In my experience, many people who want to be authors don't start, and most do give up before they finish or too soon. Mom was being generous because actually that's almost everyone. Just by showing up every day, writing your book, getting better, continuing to grow as a writer, showing up for your readers in every way, you will get there. I know this for sure. I've seen it happen to people who absolutely deserved it, and to people who were not pure of heart and probably didn't. The key differentiator for success is persistence. Just don't give up, and the odds are most definitely in your favor. That's my other little excerpt. It's a true story.
So I have not heard you talking about this in your workshop, but I know Batman very, very well. I still wait for
Yes.
Batman on my windshield all the time.
Yes.
I'm going to share my favorite quote from your mom was once when you were living up on the res in Danbury, and she left you a note and it said, mom stuff, wear your seatbelt."
Yes. Yep. That was her note to me. Mom stuff, mom stuff.
That was brilliant. I absolutely love that. Wow. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Seth Godin's minimum viable audience in a way, you know, breaking it down and breaking it down and breaking it down through those numbers to know exactly who you are in the crowd and what you can do through that kind of perseverance is just brilliant and beautiful. I'm so very, very proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know that you have some really exciting stuff happening tomorrow. And I was wondering if you would tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's 2:00, right? Laura, starts at 2. So at 2:00, and we're going for about 3 hours it'll be on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. I'll be talking with different authors from my workshop, some published, some who are about to be published, some who are working on it, about different aspects of the messaging in the book, the frameworks and tools that they use to help them write must-read books. But I'll also be doing laser coaching with some volunteers who want to talk about their books. So I'm doing about 8 laser coaching sessions during this time on core message and other things. So if you want to tune in, we're doing that live. But if you can't make it, Laura, if you could put the YouTube channel link in the slot in the chat, You can always watch the recording because the whole thing will be recorded. It'll be a lot of learning for those who are working on books. So it's a good opportunity to do that.
Fabulous. I'm curious if you have ever shared with your students any of the adventures of Peg and Cheryl.
You're kind of putting me on the spot. Peg and Cheryl. Peg was my grandma, and I actually have. It's funny you would say that because I had a story in the book which I had to cut about the publisher's sweepstakes and how one. She was my grandma. She's my mom's mom. How one day I called to check in on my grandma, and I asked her what she was doing, and she said, "Well, I'm all ready to go." She always wore a blazer with a pin, and then she had this pink lipstick. And she said, I'm all ready. I said, what are you waiting for? And she said, well, I'm ready for the publisher sweepstake to knock on my door. And I said, okay, did you submit anything to win? She said, yeah, but I'm ready now. I've got my blazer, got my lipstick. And I said, okay, well, good luck. And she was waiting. And then I happened to call my my aunt, and I was to tell her this funny story, and she said, can you hang on a minute? I'm clearing some limbs from some trees from my driveway. I was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? So the publisher's clearinghouse van can get down the driveway. It's like, did you submit? She's like, yeah, I totally did. And it, my mom had a similar, I called her then, and she had a similar story. Like when I had to cut it from the book because it didn't quite work, but my editor loved the story, but we just couldn't do it. It's just a story about applying for the thing and then believing. Like, they were not upset that they didn't win, just to be clear. But every year she put on her blazer and her little pin and her lipstick, and I'm ready. And it's just this attitude of clearing the way for it and believing in it. My grandma Peg was like that. She was feisty, and she believed in me a lot. She would have loved to have been here tonight. And Cheryl was her younger sister, and they didn't grow up together because they were 15 years apart. And my grandma left home at 15 and hitchhiked to Minneapolis because she didn't think there was enough food for all the kids. So she moved there to wash dishes and start her own life. And so later they became great friends and travel companions. And anyway, I wrote about them in the book. But the cool thing is, if you go to the Write a Must Read website, I built in, we'll see if you guys like this. I built in gamification in this book. So you can actually, when you finish a task, you can go to the website. I mean, you could go and get them all now if you don't want to wait till you complete things, but you can go get deleted content and other cool stuff. And that story is up there on the site, the Publishers Clearinghouse story, because I couldn't put it in the book, but I made it so you could read it anyway in the download.
That is brilliant. Something that you taught me was to sort of live read along with authors on Twitter, because authors love words and they love hearing about.
Oh, you mean to live tweet your reading?
Yes.
I don't know. Julian's here. Is there anything better? I don't know if there's anything better than having a reader go on Twitter and say, I'm reading this now. And then every 20 minutes or so, oh my God, OMG. And then they put a line, or yeah, there's nothing better than a live tweet of someone reading. That's the best. You don't even need Christmas after that.
So I think we all understand the best thing that we could possibly do for AJ as we read her book is to make it go totally viral as we all live tweet about our experience. I know I'm really excited for that opportunity. I gotta say again, I'm just so really, really thrilled to be here, that you gave me this position to host tonight, because your book is going to make a humongous difference in the world to so many people. It's really, really exciting. I'm so thankful that Laura's here to put all of these amazing things into the chat. We're all going to want to save the chat so that we can get all of the extra bonuses. And so, do a lot of writers do the sort of extras that you were just discussing as far as
no, I'm so Laura's just I exhaust her. It's like, we should also do this, and we should also do this. And the other day she said, I know you really like the kitchen sink, but we don't have to give people the kitchen sink. It's just how I am. I can't really help it. I'm a little overboard. I'm extra. But I do actually have on the website, it's actually not up. It's going to be up, I hope, tomorrow or the next day. I do have a behind the book also. So what I did was I kept track of my process writing the book. And then I made little videos of how I did it and went through the process. So you can go watch that also chapter by chapter. It's supposed to, hopefully it'll be up tomorrow. Maybe it'll be up the next day, but I'll announce it when it's up and everybody can go look. So it's kind of like if you ever saw VH1 Behind the Music, I only have 80s references. I only have, that's it. I'm just 80s and 90s I'm stuck there. But it's a behind the book, just because, it's hard to, I like to show people, and it's just harder to do. The book would be 1,000 pages if I were showing people everything that I think they need to know. So it's just easier to just share my screen and show folks. So that's what I did.
I think that is so giving. I'm so appreciative of everything that you're sharing with us and through this process, because you know your audience so well, and these are tidbits and bits and pieces that everybody in this community that you've helped create is craving. I think Laura knows it as well, and she sees what you do and says people need to see behind this curtain from time to time, and good for her for pulling that all together and pulling those teeth, so to speak.
Laura's I say in the acknowledgments of the book that she mommed this book into existence, and she did. I think before we close, I just would say some of you are really close friends, and some of you might have even read this Medium article that I wrote, which actually ended up in the book. But we had a lot of things it's 2022. The last 2 years were a challenge for a lot of people, and some of them here more than others, and for us more than others. And so Laura was really a rock through the whole thing of just making sure that everything kept running. Sometimes I wrote pages, untold number of pages for this book in hospitals, and in my car waiting because I couldn't go in a hospital because someone else, so just Laura was really, really helpful and integral actually in making sure it actually exists in the world, and that I didn't give up on it. So thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Oh, Linda, the videos are on, they're not up yet, but they're going to be on the Write a Must Read site, and I'm just going to make an announcement when they're up. So you'll be the first to know.
Brilliant. Well, the only things that I can think of would be like James Lipton's questions from, the Actors Studio.
I'll answer them if you have them.
Okay, so what is your favorite word?
My favorite word? That's not one of his questions.
It is the very first. Yes, these are questions. The concept was originated by the French television.
One of them I can't answer. One of them I can't answer because my mom's here. I just have to say that. I can't do but okay, what's my favorite word?
Yes.
I don't know. Poignant.
What is your least favorite word?
Everyone says moist, but I don't really have a problem with moist. Probably productivity.
What turns you on?
Conviction.
Ooh, what turns you off?
Willful ignorance.
What sound or noise do you love?
My wife calls them something else. So they're called mourning doves. but my wife calls them good morning doves to
Oh.
change the spelling of the word morning.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Jackhammer. I couldn't think of one. Jackhammer for sure.
We'll skip over what is your favorite curse word and
Thank
go
you. My
right
mother
to
is here. I can't.
what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would be like a city planner. I think I would be good. I would do some or rural, just something about bringing back neighborhoods and communities. I'm very interested in that. I would do that.
What profession would you not like to do?
Nurse.
If heaven exists,
I'm not good with those bodily fluids.
I understand. All right, last question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You had a good time, didn't you?
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, AJ Harper and Write a
Thanks,
Must
guys.
Read. I'm so excited. Thank you so much, AJ, for letting me be here. I'm so thrilled and so proud of you.
Thank you, Joey.